Hey there, thanks for listening. I wanted to give a brief content warning that in the letters to the editor section of this month's GamePro magazine, there's discussion of gun violence. If you'd like to skip that, once you hear the letter from the editor about Pokemon, skip ahead 3 minutes. Thanks again, and I hope you enjoy this episode of TIGY. What is up, everybody? You are listening to Today in Gaming Yesterday. I am your host, Emma Pearl, and today we are digging into February 2000 and deep diving into the Satellaview for the Super Nintendo in Japan. Stay tuned.
Let me take you back again. Oh,
Dang. New intro song. Who this, right? I'm so excited about that intro song. It's excellent. If you'd believe it, last week I talked about, in episode 1, I talked about MTV Music Generator for the PlayStation 1, and I picked it up, and I made that intro music using this piece of software on my PlayStation 1. I actually did it live on Twitch, twitch.tv/Emma Pearl. I made that theme song. I hope you like it. Let me know what you think. I had so much fun making it. It's a really, really cool tool. I cannot get over how good this game is. There are sequels for the PS2 that exist that are apparently pretty good, and I really do want to check them out. It was so much fun to make the theme song using this. Like I said, my name is Emma Pearl. You're listening to Today in Gaming Yesterday, and today is all about February 2000. A few quick reminders before we dig in today. We also got a new logo. What do you think? What do you think of the new logo? I think it's pretty sick. I'm very excited about it. You'll find it all over everything. Really incredible stuff made by Royce. So please check out Royce Remix. Twitch makes tons of really cool animations and logos and graphics. Really, really, really talented. So excited to have it as part of my podcasting stuff now. If you're enjoying your time here with Today in Gaming Yesterday and me, your host, Emma Pearl, EP, please do follow the podcast. Subscribe to it on YouTube if you'd like. It's super helpful and helps out quite a bit. You can also rate, review, all that good stuff on your podcasting platform of choice, Spotify, Apple, whatever that looks like. Love it for you. Please do leave a rating and a review. It super duper helps out. So I want to give a few thank yous today before we dig in. I want to give a huge thank you to SegaRetro.org, RetroCDN.net, RetroMags.com, Bulbapedia, SuperFamicom.org, Nintendo Fandom Wiki, All Reliable Wikipedia, and MarioWiki.com. Today, our order of operations, as we dig into 2000 and our deep dive, we're going to go over GamePro from February 2000, then dig into Nintendo Power from February 2000, and then, as mentioned, our deep dive into the Satellaview. I made a joke tweet along the lines of like, let me tell you all about the Satellaview, and people seeped into it, and this is a topic that I had researched previously, and I was super interested in it. I thought I knew a lot about it before now. I had no idea. And I'm so excited to tell you everything that I've learned to get you into this world of incredible, immersive, interactive online gaming before that was even a thing that most folks were thinking about. And it's just absolutely incredible. I'm so excited to share this with you. I want to make a quick note, too. I tried really hard to add in another source this week, a Brazilian video game magazine translated into action games. It's in Portuguese. EP finds a way from time to time to find a source and dig into it. I found PDFs of the magazine, the text files of those PDFs, and then I translated those text files from Portuguese into English, but there just wasn't that much meat in the February 2000 issue. Nothing that really did some light bulbs in my brain, nothing that seems super interesting to share with y'all. So if you ever have sources that you're interested in sharing, please do reach out to tigyypod@gmail.com. You can also follow the show on Twitter at tigyypod. And yeah, let us dig in to February 2000. So I personally cannot think of February without thinking about Valentine's Day. Straight up, Valentine's Day. I love Valentine's Day. I'll be honest, I can't tell you that many like cool, very romantic Valentine's Day experiences I've had in terms of romantic love on Valentine's Day, but I absolutely love even celebrating and appreciating and showing appreciation for platonic love on Valentine's Day. I absolutely love loving my friends. It is the best. And like a holiday about love, I'm super duper in. I also really like giving out Valentines. It's something I've done most of my life. Just a little thing to like make somebody smile, to like show a little bit of appreciation. I'm all for that. And actually this all reminded me in high school, I used to just love tooling around town in my car and vibing out, whatevs, listening to music. I used to go to Big Lots. And one year, I want to say it was 2007 or 2008, I actually, at Big Lots, stumbled upon an unopened box of Pokemon Valentines from, it had to have been the early 2000s on the shelves. And of course I bought them, and they were in perfect condition. And I wonder what happened to them. I think I probably still have some somewhere, like in my parents' house, amongst my stuff from high school. But yeah, I super love Valentine's Day. If anything, I wish that these magazines dug more into how important Valentine's Day is, but I digress. We're going to go ahead and at first talk a bit about the top 10 best-selling games as per GamePro from June 2000. We used our future abilities to check that out, and I can tell you what those top 10 games were and their platforms. The number one best-selling game of February 2000 was Mario Party 2 for the N64. Coming in at number 2 was Crazy Taxi on the Dreamcast, a game that somebody actually just told me the other day to try out, so maybe this is my good sign to do it. Number 3, Gran Turismo 2 for the PlayStation. Number 4, NHL 2K for the Dreamcast. Every time I go to my favorite local video game store, Game Over Video Games, I swear they have like 8 or 9 copies of NHL 2K. Allegedly, it's good. It was the number 4 in February 2000. Maybe I should check it out. We, in number 5, have WWF WrestleMania 2000 for the N64. Number 6, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater on the PlayStation. Number 7, Dukes of Hazzard Racing for Home on the PlayStation. Number 8, Donkey Kong 64 on the N64, a recent release at this time. Number 9, Spyro the Dragon for PlayStation. And coming in at number 10, Gran Turismo for the PlayStation. In addition to the top 10 bestsellers, we have Blockbusters Hot Rentals for February 2000. So we'll start with the N64. Number 1 hottest rental, DK64. Could have guessed that one, I'm sure, right? Number 2, WWF WrestleMania 2000. Number 3, Toy Story 2. Number 4, Army Men, Sarge's Heroes. Riveting stuff, I'm sure. Number 5, Ready to Rumble Boxing. Number 6, Rainbow Six. Number 7, South Park, Chef's Love Shack. Number 8, Castlevania Legacy of Darkness. Number 9, Resident Evil 2. And coming in at number 10 for Blockbusters Hot Rentals on the N64 in February 2000, Turok, Rage Wars. We dug into that last episode. Good stuff. So for PlayStation, the hot rentals of 2000 in February were number 1, Gran Turismo 2, shocked. Number 2, Resident Evil 3, Nemesis. Number 3, did I say number 2? This is number 3 now. Vigilante 8, Second Offense. Coming in at number 4 was Ready to Rumble Boxing. Number 5, Tomorrow Never Dies. Number 6, Toy Story 2. Number 7, Medal of Honor. Number 8, Tomb Raider, The Last Revelation. We know all about that one too. Number 9, The Dukes of Hazzard Racing for Home. And coming in at number 10 for Blockbusters Hot Rentals of February 2000 on PlayStation is Grand Theft Auto 2. Pretty cool list. I mean, we obviously are starting to see the connections between January into February with coming out, coming out strong with rental capacity and what people are actually looking for, as well as the top sales. It's very interesting to me that Mario Party 2 was at the top of the best-selling games list. I love that. I think that's really sick. And for me, it just shows like the value of a fun party game. But then also Crazy Taxi, launching into number 2 is really incredible too. So let us dig into GamePro from February 2000. The cover for this one is all Pokemon. It is so sick. Big into Pokemon Stadium, talking a little bit about the Pokemon trading card game on Game Boy Color. It's so interesting to me that on this cover, though, Pikachu is like the smallest Pokemon featured, so tiny, which is wild because the whole thing is like named Pikachu's plans for world domination. That whole article that we're going to dig into, kind of goofy, but the issue starts very strong with the topic of Pokemon. The letter to the editor feeds right into it and says, can we learn to love Pokemon? The only way to escape Pokemania is to hide your head in the sand. On second thought, that's not going to work either. Pokemon games have even invaded this issue's cover. So true. So they throw out some very interesting statistics. Obviously, they're still adding up the math for what's sold in 1999, but they give the statistic that 180 million Pokemon games have been sold worldwide since 1996, when the series first debuted in Japan. And they say that in the US alone, that includes 6 million games. And at this moment in time, Pokemon had only been released in the US for 1 year. So they sold 6 million copies of Pokemon games in just 1 year in the US, which obviously is huge. They give an interesting take on why people like Pokemon, which is, RPG light. It's a little role-playing game. You take responsibility for helping these little characters evolve. They talk a lot about, it's interesting, they talked a lot in the previous issue as well as this issue about like relating Pokemon to Tamagotchis, which is so interesting to me because there's not as much of a connection as I think they think there is. There's such different realms of how you interact, what they can actually do. It's kind of interesting to see this kind of more narrow-minded scope and view of Pokemon at this time. Believe me, I know that I'm inherently biased about how cool Pokemon is, but it's just so interesting to see that perspective when people didn't really see the potential and the big impact that Pokemon was going to have on everything for a while. They do, of course, mention, though, what they call Fad Building 101. TV show, movie, action figures, comic books, fast food toys, t-shirts, lunchboxes. There's so much that's not even like scratching the surface of everything that was Pokemon at this time. And I think they really did an incredible job knowing what they had and running with it. And so for that reason, I'm really surprised that they're kind of being a little bit dismissive in that way, but they'll come to see what happens, I suppose. The letters to the editor in this issue are very interesting, I think, for February 2000. I'm not sure necessarily what was going on in the broader context of the gaming world related to everything else going on in the world, too. They had 2 specific letters to the editor, specifically regarding gun violence. And, they have an interesting letter that talks about someone being concerned that the PlayStation 2 being so realistic is going to desensitize people to gun violence. And they wonder if Sony had thought about this problem and making it they say in this letter, they think it's going to make it more difficult to differentiate between video games and real life. But GamePro emphasizes that there's obviously a huge difference between doing an unspeakable act like gun violence and playing a video game. So they also kind of speak highly to the generation and say, kids have it together. They can tell the difference. They can differentiate. And then another letter actually calls out how this violence is everyone's concern, and they're impressed with how GamePro is handling this. To read this from the issue, it says, "I would like to compliment you on the way you're dealing with the issue of violence in video games. I first noticed your efforts in the editor's letter for the July 99 issue. I've also noticed that you've been running full-page ads for the Boys Town National Hotline. Thank you for making the effort to keep readers like me safe and aware." I really like GamePro's response here as well. GamePro is committed to doing its part to address the issue of gun violence in our culture. You can do your part by looking out for kids who are troubled or alone. There are plenty of worthy organizations and programs across the country seeking to help young people deal with such problems. In fact, we invite you to tell us about organizations you know that are trying to help teens avoid violence. I think that's a really awesome stance to take. If anything, it feels shocking and unbelievable that we're still having these conversations all these years later. And I agree with GamePro that these resources are important, and we all need to keep that in mind as we navigate this world, how we help people, how we connect them with resources, and also understanding who's controlling the flow of guns, of weapons into the hands of folks, and how difficult that may or may not be for them. Obviously, my heart goes out to victims, families, friends, everyone who's suffered at the hands of gun violence now, in the past. It's shocking, and I really hope that this wake-up call really, truly comes, because it would be so disappointing to look forward or look back in another 20 years and keep having to have the same conversation. The Watchdog section of this magazine also kind of talks a little bit about violence and how that's coming through in video games at this time. A parent writes in and says, hey, Grand Theft Auto 2 is rated T on the PlayStation, but M on the PC. I really how is this rated T for teen? I don't get it. And GamePro provides the context that, the graphics aren't as good on the PlayStation 1 as they are on the PC, so that is how they are able to justify that rating. They say, quote, games are rated depending on the amount of visual violence depicted. Such an interesting thing to think about with the ESRB ratings, I believe it is. Yes, ESRB. And there's really an interesting book about this that talks a lot about how GTA was developed and written. I believe it's called Jacked. Yes, Jacked, The Outlaw Story of Grand Theft Auto. I read it maybe last year. It's a really excellent book by David Kushner. It talks a lot about ESRB and how Grand Theft Auto kind of navigated through this space. Totally recommend it if you're interested in this topic a little bit more. The pro news section of this magazine actually digs into very interesting Sega Dreamcast accessories. I guess at this time they were prototype peripherals. And I don't know, I guess it's easy with the perspective I have now in the year 2022 to be like, Sega bestie, maybe you should have spent a little bit of time focusing on the games and not the wild peripherals, but they are sick to look at. I will give them that. They introduced a zip drive that sits on it like a base platform that the Dreamcast would sit on top of. Has a USB port that can plug into a Windows PC and do saves and data transfers. Fancy stuff. They also mentioned a Dreamcast camera that actually does kind of exist. I'll dig into that in a little bit. They say, video call your pals, and then also use the Dreamcast microphone. This goofy looking guy, I do want to include a picture of it in the episode guide with pictures on Twitter, so I'll be on the lookout for that. They also talk about a network card for connecting the Dreamcast to the internet. But they do mention that it may just be a glorified link cable, so TBD on that one. So as I kind of have the ability to look into the future, I looked into these accessories. And the zip drive was set to release in the third quarter of 2000, but never actually made it. But a prototype was seen on eBay in fall of 2007, if you're trying to dig in and find one that way. The Dreamcast camera did exist. It was called the Dream Eye. It had a really sick, early 2000s Y2K design with a white base of the camera and then a blue stripe on the side. Gorgeous stuff. And it came with a microphone headset so you can look cool while you're video chatting your friends while playing Dreamcast. That's the coolest thing I could imagine seeing a friend do, if I'm being quite honest. The network adapter did become a thing. It was a broadband adapter. It was released in July 2000 in Japan and then January 2001 in North America. Dreamcast online gaming is something that folks have mentioned to me in passing. I really want to dig into it more, but I have to say, if you are excited and interested in the topic of early online gaming, you are absolutely going to love the deep dive that we have for you today. Pro News also talks about a Tomb Raider trading card game called Tomb Raider Into the Caves. Of course, I had to look at eBay for this because Tomb Raider, dog. I can find lots of even sealed packs on eBay for this trading card game, but I absolutely cannot find anything about anyone actually playing this game. I guess it didn't really work out for them. I would love, if you have played the Tomb Raider trading card game, please do hit me up, tiguypod@gmail.com. Would love to see it. Would love to hear your experiences because literally I cannot find anything. Not Wikipedia, not an article, nothing. So I'm guessing it went down pretty quickly. So we're digging into the meat of this issue now with the Pikachu's Plans for World Domination feature of this magazine. And I'm pretty excited. It digs down deep into Pokemon Stadium, obviously, the new hotness of Pokemon at that time. I learned so much from this section, though. I learned that Mew did not come preloaded into Stadium. And if you wanted to use the Pokemon Mew in Pokemon Stadium, you had to transfer it from a Game Boy, which I thought was really cool. And I never had even thought about it or even looked in the rental Pokemon forum Mew. So I thought that was really sick. I also... GamePro, as they review and talk about Pokemon Stadium, they received a preview version of the game from Nintendo to review, and I'm wondering if it even included the mini games, which I never knew existed until I actually picked up Pokemon Stadium last year and played it for the first time. I did not know that Pokemon Stadium had such fun, incredible, wonderful mini games. I used to see Pokemon Stadium being being on display at my local Blockbuster, but my mom did the classic, like, you don't need Pokemon. You have Pokemon at home. And I'm like, Mom, different Pokemons. Oh, man, I really smacked the table with that one. I also am wondering if I should get the trading card game for Game Boy Color. It's not that expensive. I checked eBay, like maybe $20. Let me know. They also have a Q&A for Gold and Silver. The Japanese version of Gold and Silver was already out at this time, rock and rollin' in the hands of gamers. And so they have a list of some of the new Pokemon that they say they've been able to, quote, uncover. It's not a full list, but I am always so interested and excited about, like, ooh, new Pokemon game, reveal of characters. Like, we're seeing this right now with Scarlet and Violet, which are set to come out at the time of this recording in November of 2022. I still need to finish Pokemon Legends Arceus, honestly. I actually have like a minor surgical thing at the end of this month. I'm freezing my eggs and having an egg retrieval. So I'm like, maybe that's my time to just chill out, hang out, and maybe finish Arceus. Maybe. Fingers crossed. I would love to. Really awesome game if you haven't checked it out. You know, there's another piece in here, which I was kind of torn on even mentioning in the podcast just because it's so goofy and inflammatory. And the only reason I think I'm bringing it up is because it's such an interesting example of, like, websites and content out there that just exist to troll. It's been a thing on the internet for a while. There was a website run by Threshold Entertainment who actually produced the Mortal Kombat movies, and I wrote in my notes here, early 2000s internet trolling at its finest. I forgot about this genre of website. They write in GamePro that the site's authors are thinking of taking on boy bands when the Pokemon fad fizzles, which for me made it obvious that this website was literally just a way to get clicks, get people onto the website, sell whatever they're selling. I looked it up on the Wayback Machine through archive.org, and yeah, it's a very brightly colored, angry website talking about how bad Pokemon are and how people are sick of it and they want to destroy Pokemon. It's, you know, just that whole genre of wild, inflammatory, backgrounds bright red websites. It was kind of interesting to, like, be taken back to this world of early 2000s web pages. I fell into a major research hole of websites from the early 2000s that I used to spend a lot of time on as a bored youth in my parents' basement. But I digress. You know, it's interesting that the inflammatory content like that's just been out for a while. You know, as long as there's been an internet, there's been people who want to troll on it. So that's the internet, baby. In GamePro, they also have a preview for Tony Hawk Pro Skater for N64, which I personally never realized that there was such a gap between the PlayStation release of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and the N64 release. I really, really, really want to deep dive into this genre someday. I mentioned in episode 1, there's like that Thrasher game about skateboarding. And so I really want to understand, like, how Tony Hawk's Pro Skater had such a strong hold on the skateboarding genre of video game. And then also we're going to dig into this a little bit more with Nintendo Power. They got a really interesting feature that I'm going to talk more about in the next section of the pod. They finally do a proper review of Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation, which they had highlighted in the January issue. And disappointingly enough, it had very average scores. But they did actually include an ad for like a computer game store of some sort. And the PC versions of Tomb Raider, the boxes for these things are absolutely so rad. They're like little, like, chopped off pyramid guys. I'm going to include it in the episode guide with the accompanying images on Twitter, just because I think it's so sick. I'm like, do they even do it like that anymore? I can't think of the last time I sought out a PC game, you know, to buy physically. But I mean, if it had a sick box, I might consider it more heavily. There's also an advertisement in here for a sports game contender that I never actually knew existed, and that is ESPN The Games. I always am brought back at this time to, like, the ESPN, what I felt the ESPN branding of the early 2000s, and this ad has that same way. It's like a very clean, you know, it's very minimalistic. It's just like ESPN The Games. It's like, here's a baseball stadium, like, that's it. And it's kind of sick, and I really like it. I wanted to look more into this, and it looks like ESPN The Games was a huge partnership with Konami. I went to the Wayback Machine, of course, to see if I could look at this website and didn't really find anything that I was looking for. It's very disappointing because I really wanted to, you know, see more of that beautiful branding that I loved. A game is also mentioned in this episode of GamePro. This issue of GamePro, Vigilante 8 Second Offense on the Dreamcast. And honestly, it looks kind of sick. I never have been one much for, I guess, what they would call vehicle combat games, with the lone exception of Simpsons Road Rage, I believe, was the one I was into. Yeah, and that's just for The Simpsons, dog. I love The Simpsons forever. This game has really good reviews, though. Vigilante 8 Second Offense. They have goofy stuff like getting attacked by sharks when you're in the water. Lots of 70s music, apparently, which is a very easy way to my heart. I love 70s music. So I think I actually want to check this out, and I want to try it. It looks really, really nice. I think in this issue too, yes, they talk about Harvest Moon 64 in a review for that. It's a very, 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 very little tiny review. They have 3 tiny little screenshots, which for me felt so interesting. And I don't know if it's just the circle I roll in on the internet, but Harvest Moon always felt like such a bigger deal to me than just this tiny, tiny little feature. They give it like pretty mild reviews, honestly. 3.5 for graphics, 3.0 for sound, 4.0 controls, 4.0 for fun factor. Not terrible, but not like, go get this game. And I actually looked this up on eBay. I want to say it's like $75. Not terrible, but you know, I would have to think twice about buying it. It's funny because I looked on Wikipedia, of course, to dig more into Harvest Moon 64, because I'm like, yo, like I wanna understand why this isn't getting more fanfare. And a lot of the reviews are along the same lines of like, yeah, this game's like kind of repetitive, sometimes boring. But I looked up and I've been playing it for like 6 hours straight, which I relate to so heavily. I feel that way with Stardew Valley all the time, and I desperately want to get Harvest Moon on the Super Nintendo. I do not have a spare $600 laying around, though, which I did not realize. And I was hoping that the Nintendo Switch, Super Nintendo emulation situation would have Harvest Moon, and I do not think that it does. So I don't know what I'm going to do. Harvest Moon. I just want to like vibe out and have a farm. You know, is that relatable? You just kind of want to chill on a farm and do farm things? Is that just me? Maybe not just me. I know a lot of people are into Stardew. I also wanted to make note, too, that for the Pro Strategy Guides, they are entering part 2 of the Resident Evil 3 Nemesis review. This part of the Pro Strategy Guide is just as beefy as the part that was in the episode from the issue from January 2000. I am so impressed with how intense these Pro Strategy Guides are. Like, huge maps, so many screenshots, really take you through. I really do feel that when I play through this game, I will be referencing these maps. I played Silent Hill 1 for the first time without any kind of walkthrough, and I think I held my own, but oh my gosh. It would be nice to have a quick reference like this for sure. So GG's to GamePro for an excellent Pro Strategy Guide. And all those maps, gorgeous stuff. And this was back in the day when they had to like manually make those. Even more respect. So that wraps up everything I have to say about GamePro from February 2000. Let's take a quick break before we dig into Nintendo Power. As previously stated, you are listening to Today in Gaming Yesterday with me, your host, Emma Pearl, EP. Let's take this quick break. I will be right back. Welcome back to Today in Gaming Yesterday with me, your host, Emma Pearl. Excited to bring you Nintendo Power from February 2000. A really, really awesome issue. Very, very, very excited about it. The cover of this issue is actually Tarzan. Disney's Tarzan. Super excited to dig into that. They have some strategy guides. They have a review for Tony Hawk Pro Skater, like I mentioned. I feel like I watched Tarzan like mildly recently. I don't remember how recent it was, but I keep forgetting that the beginning of that movie is so incredibly sad. And the music is just out of this world. I think there's like been a million joke tweets about it where it's like, he did not have to go so hard. Phil Collins, right? He did not have to go so hard on the Tarzan soundtrack, but he absolutely did. And we are forever in debt to Phil Collins for that. As we get into this issue of Nintendo Power, Nintendo's still doing the Jungle Pack offer where they have that cool yet malformed banana-looking controller available. And this reminded me that on stream a few weeks ago, we actually went through the supposed Donkey Kong family tree. As I found it very confusing. I think I was playing Donkey Kong Country. And I'm like, who is this Donkey Kong? Like, there are so many of the same what appeared to me to be the same Donkey Kong. Which one is this? I cannot remember. They're all somehow related in a family tree. I also kind of thought more about it, and I'm like, when is the last time they had like a new, fresh, original Donkey Kong game? And I want to say it has been since 2014. Like, is a Donkey Kong game, like a new one, in the pipeline? If so, hit me up, let me know. I feel that I need to know, because I'm kind of invested in this family tree now. I want to see what the latest generation of Donkey Kongs are up to, and which one this is, I guess. The player's pulse of this issue, which is the letter to the editor moment. I believe I must have missed it in the last issue. They ask the question, hey, are you going to be upset if like Perfect Dark doesn't release like quote on time? And I wrote here in my notes, quote, drama, which I have in quotations because Nintendo Power seems to be a little bit shocked that all of the replies that they got to that question are very reasonable. People reasonably being like, hey, I'd rather just wait for the game if it's going to make it good. But apparently they got 4,000 spam emails that say Perfect Dark now. So, you wonder how many of those letters that came in were actually reasonable. It seems like a lot of the ones that they had here were, though. So, good for the Nintendo Power viewers that did want to wait for a high-quality game, which Perfect Dark ended up being, I would say. I tried it out a little bit ago. I get a little bit lost in games like that, but it's fine. Not a big deal. I'm sure I will make it someday. Of course, they feature a stacked Pokemon Stadium feature, which they call out, which to me, I didn't even register this. This is the first time you really would see your Pokemon in 3D, having like 3D fights. And also from this Pokemon Stadium feature of this issue of Nintendo Power, I learned that you could use Pokemon Stadium. You could plug the Game Boy into the expansion pack piece of the controller and play the game that way. We talked about that in last episode when we talked a little bit about Pokemon Stadium, but I also didn't realize you could like do easier item organization and Pokemon storage organization. The ways that I had organized my items in Pokemon Blue, Yellow was absolutely miserable. And if I would have known that this was a possibility, wouldn't have helped me as a kid. Did not have an N64 then, but it would have helped me now as an adult. And for that, I am sad. They have an ad for Harvest Moon 64, which is obviously Harvest Moon is on the brain for me. And like I said, $75. But God, this ad is so cute. There's corn. There's a character running. There's a dog with a red bandana. That is all it takes for me. You show me some corn. You show me a dog in a cute bandana. I'm like, let's buy it. Maybe it's good that I didn't have an N64 at this time. They have a feature that I kind of did not expect in this, which was about the Nintendo Software Technology Corporation, which is their North American design house for making games. They mentioned that when, it first spun up, it really was kind of going along with the Nintendo strategy that I read in the Nintendo book that I mentioned in the last episode. They kind of did that with the release of the Game Boy Advance. Nintendo was like, yo, let's just take a bunch of Super Nintendo games and let's just rework them, release them on that. 32 bits, it's what the people want. Let's ship it. And it seems like they continued the trend now with releasing all that emulation on the Switch. And that is primarily what this design house in North America was primarily used for at first, reworking classic games. They talk a lot about how they make games, flowcharts, storyboarding, all that cool stuff that probably for kids is super exciting to read about, because I never really thought about it at the time, but like maybe making video games is like probably a cool career choice. They talk about how they were creating games as well as designing the tooling to create games. So kind of a really all-in-one, like, we're making the games and we're making the stuff that's going to make the games, which kind of makes sense. It seems like an easier way to get like a high quality tooling piece when the people who are making the tooling are using the tooling. So they can actually be like, yo, this works versus, yo, this does not work. A quote that I pulled out here that I thought was great too says, perhaps the most important work of all being done at NST is also the most secret. Development is underway there for the next generation of video games that will be played on the Dolphin system. Gamers should expect Nintendo Software Technology to make a big splash in the coming months. We love a pun. Dolphin splash. Love a pun. as I mentioned when talking about GamePro, the Tony Hawk Pro Skater feature in this Nintendo Power is absolutely gorgeous. It appears to me from the scans that I'm looking at that they had like a fold out giant thing. It's this huge, huge wide display that talks about all the different ways that you can do tricks, all the different skaters. It has incredible screenshots. It has like almost a flip book style showing of a trick. It looks like some kind of flip and grab combo perhaps being performed off of a half pipe in the game. It's so sick. This feature is absolutely gorgeous. Great shots of Tony Hawk. This would have gotten me super stoked. And now I kind of want to pick it up for the N64 just to see what it's like. This also brings me to a sidebar because they have two really cool features for games called Fighter Destiny 2, and then they have another feature for Ridge Racer 64. And fighting and racing games just never really did it for me growing up, and so the nostalgia factor is like not there for me now. Is there a fighting or racing game, or both, that you think really speaks to, you know, the best of this era in those genres? If so, please let me know. I'd love to check it out. Reach out to me, tiguypod@gmail.com. I'm always interested in recommendations for these genres that I just don't have that much experience in. I think that's been an important piece of me maturing and becoming an adult, which is like getting to a point where I can say, I don't actually have an opinion on that. Instead of being like, no, that game sucks. Racing game, it sucks. Like, heck no. I'm sure there's an awesome racing game out there. I need to know what it is. I need to try it out, right? They have a really, really cool feature about a game called CyberTiger, which I thought was like a cute tagline, but actually is the game, CyberTiger. I will say I do have a bias and appreciation for golf games. I have been and am a bit of a golfer myself. Tiger Woods and I are actually birthday buddies. We share the same birthday, December 30th. So I feel, you know, Tiger and I'm sure if he met me, he'd think I was pretty rad. I'm sure I'd think he's pretty rad too. I also used to go very hard on golf on the NES, which I don't know how I did, because that game, 100% silent. There is not a shred of music in that game. I can hear the sounds of when you hit the ball and it goes super high up in the air and falls down. I hear it in my brain forever. They also have a very rad image that I'm going to include in the episode guide of Tiger Woods covered in like motion capture devices, because they actually, for this game, they covered him in these motion devices so that they could realistically get his swing, which I think is really cool. And I think Tiger Woods' swing has like updated over time. Imagine having a swing coach. Could never be me. My swing is terrible. I'm so sorry, Tiger, my birthday buddy. I'm sorry to let you down with my swing like that. We get into the Poke Center section of Nintendo Power, which is and probably will continue to be as long as we see it in Nintendo Power. Who knows when it'll stop? This is my favorite section. Pokemon Stadium everywhere, obviously. There's like a letter to the editor specifically about Pokemon called Poke Chat. And they have this question that I think I saw actually on Twitter too recently, which is, I'm going to read word for word here. I've been staring at pictures of Diglett and Dugtrio for a long time, and I can't figure something out. Is that reddish blob on their faces a nose or a mouth? If it's a nose, where is its mouth? And if it's a mouth, where is its nose? They say verbatim, We're not exactly confident on this one, as our staff of Pokemon anatomists, is that how you say that word? Is currently on vacation. A better question may be, what would the rest of its body look like if it came above ground? No. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Also, a fun fact I never learned previously that I learned from this PokeChat is somebody complains that, oh my god, I have this useless Pokeflute now that I've woken up the Snorlax. You can actually use the Pokeflute and it does the same job as Awakening in battle. Where was I? I guess not reading this. That's how I never knew. By far, my favorite section is Ask the Professor, which is just like such a cute idea that like, oh yeah, Professor Oak's here to tell you what's going on. And this section taught me so much from this issue of Nintendo Power. I cannot deal with it. So they talk a little bit about the special Pikachu pictures of Pokemon Snap, which I played that game on stream for the first time. Incredible game. It took me a long time, but I finished the Pokédex of that game and it was sick. They talk about I never actually knew that there's a surfing Pikachu special Pikachu picture in this game, which is embarrassing given the surfing Pikachu that is on my arm for as long as I have this arm. Kind of bonkers, I never knew. And also there's allegedly a Pikachu on a ball special picture. You love to see it. This right here is the most amazing thing. If you knew this and you're just like, boo, EP, old news, please do let me know. I thought this was wild. There's actually a way in Pokemon Yellow where your rival starts with Eevee to determine what that Eevee is going to evolve into. And you can know based on the outcome of your fights, battles with your rival. So, your rival always starts with Eevee. We said that. The battles will determine what it evolves into, meaning specifically, if you lose the very first battle against your rival at Oak's Lab, Eevee will turn into a Vaporeon. Straight up. No question, that's it. If you win the first battle, but lose or pass up the battle west of Viridian City, that Eevee will turn into a Flareon. So if you win the lab battle and the Viridian battle, both battles, you're the champ, get wrecked, rival, Eevee becomes a Jolteon. Which, holy cow. I never knew that. I've played through that game multiple times through all those fights. I've never even thought about it. Did you know that? Should I have been using that strategically while I was playing through? Who knows? I'm obsessed with it. I think that's so cool. This section also brought up one of the more harrowing memories of my childhood. This section talks about where can I catch a Ditto? They can tell you what routes to go to, whatever. This is truly one of my more embarrassing childhood memories that I am so thrilled to share with you all today on this podcast. My very first playthrough of Pokemon Yellow, I get the Master Ball. Huge moment. Master Ball, that's it. I'm so stoked. Everybody's stoked when they get their Master Ball, right? I'm going about my business. I have my Master Ball ready to just get a Pokemon that I want. I stumble upon a Ditto. I'm sure this is shocking, but Ditto is one of my favorite Pokemon. When people ask me what my favorite Pokemon is, I usually say Ditto. Just because, Ditto can become anything, and he's so fun and cute, and he has his little face, and, the face of Ditto is the face of every other Pokemon when Ditto becomes that Pokemon. It's very cute and good. So I'm like, oh my god, Ditto. What am I going to do? I can't decide if I should use my Master Ball on the Ditto or not. So I assume, I'm never going to see a Ditto again. This is my Ditto. This is it. To help validate my decision-making, I actually I don't even know if they have these anymore. My elementary school had a directory, a phone number directory. I get in there. I look up a classmate of mine, his home phone number. I call him up. His mom answers. I'm like, hey, is he there? I get him on the horn, right? I say, hey, should I use my Master Ball to catch Ditto, or should I use it to catch another Pokemon like Mewtwo? And he says, you know what? I think you should catch that Ditto. So that's what I do. I use my Master Ball in Pokemon Yellow to catch Ditto. Later, I feel regret for making this decision, to be quite honest. I confront him, as surely as intensely as an elementary school child can confront another one about Pokemon issues, and I say, what is the deal? Why did you tell me to catch that Ditto with my Master Ball? And he comes up with the excuse of, I thought you were talking about the card game. You liar. You lied to me. You led me astray. And so, yeah, that's it. That is probably my most embarrassing Pokemon memory that I do not tell many people. So I guess now I've told everyone that could ever hope or want to know. So I'm so glad I could really get that off my chest. I've lived with this for, I guess, 20 years. So I'm excited to be here now. Oh my goodness. As we dig in through the rest of this episode of Nintendo Power, I find this interesting feature too, where it's Pokemon episode 13, blah, which I'm like, oh wow, it literally is screenshots from the Pokemon anime. And so in my notes, I'm like, wow, is this just the anime? I look up episode 13, and yes, this is, honest to God, just a retelling in comic book format of episode 13 of the Pokemon anime. The entire thing. The whole thing. The whole thing at the lighthouse. Great stuff, but I'm just like, wow, they really wanted people to get into the anime, and it was so cute. And like, I love that they have this feature, and it's so sweet. But I'm also like, that's so goofy. That leads to a gorgeous Game Boy feature. They feature quite a few different games for the Game Boy Color in here. Lots of really good walkthroughs. The game that I found most interesting and wanted to dive in the most here was actually the new adventures of Mary-Kate and Ashley for the Game Boy Color. So you'd think it wouldn't be that intense. You know, it's a puzzle game. It has like 2D platformer vibes. What's very interesting is that the twins, Mary-Kate and Ashley, they both have their own special skills, and you cannot win this game unless they cooperate. Like, oh my God, yes. Like, what an important moral lesson for all of us as we play the new adventures of Mary-Kate and Ashley on the Game Boy Color. Only Ashley can flip switches. You can tell which one is Ashley because her ponytail points up. You know, I can't think of the last time I met somewhat identical twins, but I'm sure that the ponytail is the differentiator. They also in here call out the more athletic twin, Mary-Kate. She can jump higher than literally any character in the game. And she can actually boost other characters to higher levels in this game. Her ponytail points down, if you needed to know. There's also a dog character in this game named Clue. And they kind of just gently throw this in without any context until later in the feature. And they say, quote, in addition to his projectile status. And I'm like, you throw the dog? You throw this dog in this game. Okay. In addition to being thrown, Clue, the dog of this game, is also a step stool. So you stand on this dog to get to hard to reach places. And then they divulge the information that in order to get rid of enemies, you throw the dog at the enemies. They justify it by saying you have to throw him at the enemies. He can't simply walk up to them and ask them politely to go away. Cool. Great. And I don't know why I made this note, but I guess I think about it with games now. This game does feature fall damage. Very important. I was curious in this game, can you pet the dog? There's actually a Twitter account, if y'all don't know, called Can You Pet the Dog? I really need them to be on the case. I'm tempted to submit this to them so they can provide us with the important information of, can you pet this dog? Because in this game, they do not seem to respect precious Clue by using him as a projectile. So, you know, if you could at least pet him, give him a treat, something, it might potentially make up for it. So at the end of all of the Nintendo Powers, they have a now playing section where they will give out scores of ratings and reviews for their latest releases, with obviously the Nintendo bias because they are releasing all of them. So the highest rated game is shockingly our cover story, Tarzan, with an 8.5. Lowest is Test Drive with a 6. Still scored better than Dogs for the Game Boy Color, which does make me upset. It's worth noting that the aforementioned Mary-Kate and Ashley game, where you use a dog as a projectile, scored a 6.1, which it doesn't make sense to me that a game where you probably cannot pet the dog scored higher than a game where the whole point is to pet dogs. But what do I know? Also, they use the most groan-inducing phrase that I've seen in this magazine in a minute. It's about time for Game Girl Color. Oh God, I just noticed this too as I'm looking at the magazine. They talk about the ESRB rating and they mention, we would like to add that players should not imitate the game at home by throwing dogs at spiders. Let me make that an official PSA of this podcast as well. Don't throw your dog. Don't. And do not throw your dog at a spider in particular. As we look ahead to the March issue, they dig into the fact that there will be somehow an even bigger feature on Pokemon Stadium, as well as a feature on Perfect Dark, and also Hydro Thunder, which sounds kind of fun. And then they also go into this, oh God, it's just a beautiful image. A feature on all of the fun colored N64s, the translucent ones that have like all of the, they call them flavors, and it's because all of the names are just like so fun and like food related. So the flavors of colorful N64s, watermelon, ice, jungle, fire, smoke, grape, which now that I'm saying all of these out loud, flavors, you can get away with saying like watermelon's a flavor, grape is a flavor, fire flavor, Smoke, flavor, jungle. Like, okay, absolutely. These are available after March 10th of 2000. And I would, despite only 2 of them being actual flavors, I would like 1 of each. Thank you very much. That about wraps it up for Nintendo Power. I am so excited to dig into this deep dive on Satellaview for the Super Nintendo with you. Next up, let's take a quick break in the meantime. In case you forgot, you are listening to Today in Gaming Yesterday with me, your host, Emma Pearl. We're going to take a quick break, and then we will go into this month's deep dive. I am so excited. Stay tuned. I'll see you in a second. Welcome back to Today in Gaming Yesterday with me, your host, Emma Pearl. I am absolutely thrilled to go into this deep dive with you today about Satellaview for the Super Nintendo. Which, listen, Super Nintendo, admittedly, pretty 90s stuff. But I think I can make the case for this because as of February 2000, this service was still up and running in Japan. You'll find out. I had a good conversation with some folks about this topic on Twitter, and I had previously dug into this kind of for fun and for like a presentation I gave about it. I am really excited to tell you all that I thought I knew a lot about Satellaview before. I knew nothing. I know so much now, and I am so excited to share this with you. I'm so stoked. I think if we ever dig into the aforementioned Dreamcast online gaming, having an existing idea of that landscape as it looked, especially in Japan, will be helpful to us. I'm just so excited. So to start off this deep dive, I would actually like to paint you a picture with words. Like Bob Ross, except I'm just going to talk right at you, okay? Let me paint this picture for you. It's Monday. Oh God, bad key I chose for that. But again, it's Monday, September 2nd, 1996. You are a kid, maybe an early teen. You live in Japan, love gaming. It's like your whole vibe. You get home from school, you rock through your homework, grab some food, you sprint to your TV set where you have your Super Nintendo, Super Famicom, as it's referred to in Japan, hooked up, resting on top of your Satellaview device, just hooked into the bottom. You take a glance at your watch very quickly, making sure you're not running late. It says 17:50. You're doing great on time. You feel awesome. You still have some time to get set up, so you slide in the system cartridge for Satellaview, BSX, the town whose name was stolen, it's called. You plug that into your Super Famicom. You plug in the 8 megabyte memory card, used to store magazines, games, all the things you're into. You plug that in, you boot that baby up. As the game loads, launches, you begin walking around the town with the character that you customized for this experience. You talk to the townspeople, you see the buildings all around you in this virtual world. You start gathering coins from them, and then you hear a soothing voice, an announcer's voice coming over saying, "Hey, BS Harvest Moon Soundlink broadcast is starting soon. You better get it downloaded. You better get ready to go." You had heard some friends talk about this game, Harvest Moon. It had been released earlier that year. You'd never tried it out yourself, though, so you're so excited to basically try out this demo version with Soundlink capabilities that's exclusive to the Satellaview. And so you're getting ready to download that on your memory expansion at 1800, 6 o'clock, right on the dot. So you navigate to the building where the download happens. You take your character there. You kind of chill out while the game downloads. There's a little status bar at the bottom of the screen. Slowly fills up while you listen to some hit music from the 80s, right? After it finishes downloading, that bar's filled up. The screen flips to an intro page for the game. It outlines the game that you're going to be playing. It has a little picture of the controller that shows you the buttons, the controls you're going to be using to play the game. And then there's this sick little countdown timer at the top left of the screen that shows you just how much longer you have to wait until this limited time event is about to start. The announcer's voice excitedly ushers you into the experience. You see an intro slide, the game loads in, and you begin to explore this world. It's a preset Harvest Moon world. You know, you can't do everything you would do in the game, but it's brought to you for free as part of your subscription by Satellaview. As you play the game, there is a narrator, you know, providing live tips and tricks and information. It's intermixed with stereo quality audio of sick tracks from the 80s, all kinds of good stuff for you to listen to. The announcer describes the game mechanics. They give you tips, and it's your first time playing, so you're pretty grateful for that. You enjoy the farm life, listening to the radio, essentially rocking out to some music, and occasionally a celebrity voice pops onto that feed, telling you a joke, giving you information, keeping the mood light. At predetermined times, a countdown will happen, and then the season will change in the game, or a rain shower will bring a haze of gentle raindrops across your screen. It's a really, really cool experience, and so you set a little mental note to block off the next 3 Monday nights, because you don't want to miss the other 3 episodes of this very limited time Harvest Moon Satellaview event. After an hour of this gaming fun, the clock strikes 1850, the soundlink transmission, your access to the game closes. Your avatar comes back into town. The announcer encourages you to tune in next time. There's 3 more episodes to enjoy of this awesome game on Satellaview. You shut down the Super Famicom, go about the rest of your evening, not realizing that the game that you just played will be rebroadcast via soundlink on Satellaview just one more time, and then never again. And as of the recording of this podcast, episode 1 of BS Harvest Moon has never been seen again since November 1996 when they did a rerun. But that was it. And it's gone. Forever. Maybe? That's what we're going to dig into today. So hopefully I kind of took you into the world of this immersive, interactive, online gaming experience. So let me give you the basics about this system. It's called the Broadcast Satellaview X, BSX, BS-X, but folks mostly just refer to it as the Satellaview. And there's actually a funny fun fact about this. Nobody actually knows what the X stands for. Some people thought it meant like, oh, X, like you're transferring data. Some think it's like X, like, ooh, unknown, like an X-Files moment. But actually, nobody really knows. So if you know, if you're the holder of the secret of what the X means, please reach out to me. Would love the scoop. The service itself allowed players to download games, magazines, lots of different media through satellite broadcasts. It's worth noting that there was no actual multiplayer element to this, since it was just mostly able to receive data, but it could send back small bits of data, answers to quizzes, things like that via radio. And the broadcast services were provided by, I really wanted to look up the name of this company to see if I'm pronouncing it right. If I'm not, I'm going to say it wrong then the rest of the episode. Please roast me in my email if it is wrong. The services were provided by St. Giga, St.Giga, which I will call St. Giga. We'll see what happens. So this service was announced by Nintendo on December 21st, 1994, and they thought this was going to be it. Huge. Leadership was like, guess what, y'all? This Satellaview hardware and service, we're going to sell 2 million of these dudes per year. Straight up. It's going to be boss. Pre-orders started on February 25th, 1995, and interestingly enough, at the beginning, it was just mail order only. So you couldn't really buy it in stores at all. And maybe this was more common back in the day, kind of a mid-90s moment, but it's hard to imagine now, right? The broadcasts themselves coming from satellite started on April 1st, and the device was actually released on April 24th. There were some hiccups over time that they discovered with the service, the legality of publishing certain games, playing certain music, and then also they were limited technically by the time that they were in. It's worth noting, though, that by March 1997, there were 116,378 exactly active users of the service. So how this thing actually worked, it plugged into the bottom of the Super Nintendo. If you're unaware, the Japanese name for the Super Nintendo is the Super Famicom, which is the Famicom Super version, Famicom, Family Computer. I'll probably just call it the Super Nintendo for my own brain to be consistent in the podcast. It included a special bracket because it pulled power from the Super Nintendo to power the Satellaview piece that plugged into the bottom through the expansion ports. It required a special BS tuner to kind of pick up from that satellite dish and then tune it into something that the Satellaview could receive. And then you access the service by that special cartridge I mentioned during our immersion earlier. and it connected to the broadcast services from St. Giga. And so the menu of this interface cartridge is so wild. It's actually how you access the service, how you download magazines, download games, find information, find news. It's like an Earthbound style town that you navigate through. You make a customized avatar that moves through this world and accesses the services that way. It is so sick and something so fun. The cartridge itself, the actual access cartridge, had 512 kilobytes of storage built in, which fit most games, but you could buy an expansion of 8 megabytes so you could really store games, store magazines, hold on to things for a while. As mentioned, they had magazines, which included things like game guides, video game news, standard stuff. They also had their own exclusive version of Nintendo Power, which you can actually find a ROM of online, the BS Nintendo Power ROM. So sick. I kind of wanted to check it out. Didn't really have time, but if you check it out, let me know what you think. This featured also the first real instance of what we would consider DLC. You could download new characters, levels, and patches for existing games that you had. So these add-ons had to be downloaded onto those memory packs. You couldn't put them on the cartridge. And you could buy, actually, memory packs that had the add-ons already installed on them, which is kind of rad. One of the biggest things to mention with this that we'll dig into more as we kind of dig into the games as well is a feature called SoundLink. SoundLink is something that in my notes I wrote, it's so beefy that you had to pay an extra 600 yen, which I actually did the math. Kind of just seems like an extra $5 per month on top of the existing subscription costs. What SoundLink did is really incredible though, and I'll dig into that as we talk about the game that I really dove into for this. So there were 114 total games that were released for Satellaview and available on Satellaview. A lot of them were games that had already existed, just kind of like refreshed, re-uploaded onto the service that you could download for free, which was sick. And most of these games were Nintendo games, but there were some third-party titles as well. As I mentioned, the games are free, but you had to pay for the subscription. You had to buy add-ons. So I'm glad that the games were free because, you're paying for the subscription, you're paying for SoundLink, you paid for that hardware. Thanks for the free games, besties. There were a lot of versions of popular Nintendo games, like interesting little sequels that were released for Satellaview and only Satellaview. I wanted to include that this is a limited list and does not include everything that was released in this format, but games include a BS version of F-Zero, which included SoundLink support, BS Harvest Moon, like I mentioned earlier, that had SoundLink support. They had a BS Legend of Zelda with SoundLink, which is so wild. There's interesting debate online on if, is this an actual Zelda game or is this more of a spin-off of a Zelda game? Because you don't actually play as Link. You play as your character from the Satellaview Access cartridge town. You play as this customized character that has been beamed into the world of Zelda and Link and not actually as Link. Very interesting. And also it's worth noting that BS Legend of Zelda was the first SoundLink game. And they really learned from the SoundLink process how to make things better. It used to be, when they were doing announcements, they would freeze you in place and you couldn't move. But then, of course, that limited the amount of time that you could actually play the game because it was through a limited time window that it was available. They also had a Mario Paint version for Satellaview that didn't require the mouse. And I'm still dying to get my hands on Mario Paint. I think I could really make some sick art with that thing. I decided to dig into one game in particular that just really caught my eye, and that was the BS Super Mario Collection that had SoundLink. The first time this was broadcast was December 28th, 1997. It was over the course of 4 weeks, and it finished up on January 18th, 1998. During the SoundLink broadcast of this game, they'd play like cool remixes of Mario music, but they would also play popular 80s hits like The Power of Love by Huey Lewis and the News, the Never-Ending Story theme song, and also Born in the USA. What a hit. I'm going to include a YouTube link in the episode description to a recording of this first episode of the Super Mario Collection broadcast via Satellaview with SoundLink because it is absolutely wild to think that this was happening in 1997. I mentioned here in the notes that it gives me Fortnite concert vibes. If anybody virtually attended, but in my mind attended like the Ariana Grande concert in Fortnite. It was all of us enjoying this special moment together, hype, excitement, limited time. It felt so great. And I can only imagine how exciting this felt for folks playing this on their Super Nintendo in the 90s. You were honestly time-bound and immersed in this world, in these levels that were specially created for this moment in time. And it was a playable game. You actually played Mario. I really hope that y'all check out this YouTube video. It's an hour long because the Satellaview broadcast was a little bit under an hour. And thankfully, the person that recorded it included the beginning part where they were kind of wandering through the town, as well as the broadcast ending. It honestly is a really sick experience. And for me, it feels so exciting and something that, you know, if I look back with this piece of nostalgia in me that I know I'll never get to experience it, I wish I could have, because it just feels like this really incredible moment in time and this technological innovation and this rare thing that, as I mentioned in our little immersion earlier, a lot of these SoundLink broadcasts are lost. Sometimes people recorded them with a VHS. That's what happened with this Mario one. But some of these broadcasts are never to be seen again, which actually makes Satellaview a very interesting research and dig-in area for a lot of video game historians, because they are scouring, trying to find what they refer to as like a cartridge dump. So essentially what they do is they rely on people who, you know, if you ever had... It's almost like when you outgrow your toys and your parents pack them all up and just throw them in the attic, right? They are essentially relying on people who took their Satellaview and their Super Nintendo, grabbed it all and threw it in the attic. And their cartridges, the memory expansions that could be up to 8 megabytes, may still have this game data on them. And so they're relying on folks who find these to dump the data to recover what this was. And it's interesting too, I was like really, really digging into this, as I often do. And SoundLink games could be downloaded onto these expansion packs. Obviously, they had to be downloaded onto the memory expansion pack. But when the SoundLink broadcast wasn't happening, you couldn't access it. So if you plug that memory cartridge in through the access cartridge into the Satellaview world anytime but the SoundLink, it's going to tell you that nothing's on there. But folks have found through these cartridge dumps that the games and the data and all of that is still actually there. They just, you know, blocked it off with a wall when the SoundLink broadcast wasn't happening. So it's super interesting how they're actually finding and archiving these things. And there's another piece of this world too where, you know, they may not have the ROM, the dump from the cartridge, but they have a recording, and they will use that video recording to remake the levels, remake everything about it without actually having access to the ROM, which is so incredible, such a labor of love, something so awesome that like just makes me so excited and grateful for this community of people that are stoked on the history of video games like this, and these previously inaccessible games and experiences that can maybe now be a little bit closer to accessible. Really went off there, but I just think that's so interesting. So let's talk a little bit about what happens, because this sounds sick, right? If I haven't made you at least a little bit excited about this service by this point, I really have done something wrong, I think. There are a few main points that made Satellaview not actually end up working out. Consumer adoption was a little bit weird. Next-gen consoles were already coming out at this time. Things like the PlayStation 1, the Sega Saturn, even the N64. It's also worth noting that in order to get people to adopt this technology at all, if they're not buying the next gen of video game systems, they could only order it mail-in or from very specific electronic stores. It's also worth noting, too, that Nintendo and St. Giga were beefing. The way that they came to this partnership was because St. Giga had the technology, the access to satellite broadcast that Nintendo needed for this and was interested in. So in order to get this partnership rolling, they took a stake in the company. But as part of that, they wanted the ability to offer advice to St. Giga as a whole. They were allegedly in a lot of debt. And so Nintendo's like, listen, bestie, we're pretty good at this. We survive video game crashes. We will help you come up with a plan, and we'll give you this plan to get out of debt. And they were like, no, we don't want your plan. I think I read, I could be wrong, they were possibly 8 million yen in debt, perhaps more, but enough debt that Nintendo's like, we got to do something about this. But they resisted. Nintendo said, peace out. They were out. They were pulling out their support. And that happened in March 1999. But St. Giga kept this service going until June 2000. So at the time of this Nintendo Power, Satellaview was still a thing. Games were still being broadcast and available to be downloaded. Nintendo considered Satellaview a failure, but retrospective feedback from lots of different sources is mostly positive. There's a lot of strength with storytelling in regards to tying in the sound link, the narration, the music, things that could be provided to the gaming experience and add to the overall storytelling that you couldn't just get with any other game and console. The technological advancement of this too, even though it was a little bit limited by its time, was still immense. So cool. So much out there. It's a pretty sick games library if you think about it. I implore you to check the list of 114 games available, but imagine your own little custom character running through Zelda games. That's so cool. So that itself kind of set it apart from everything else at the time too. And then, of course, an interactive environment and experience and a new way of interactive content and TV that people just hadn't seen before. A successor to this service, I must say, was referred to as Randnet. This was available on the N64 via the N64DD. What a name. This was announced in 1995 prior to the launch of the N64 in 1996. It actually launched in 1999, but only lasted until 2001. I didn't dig too hard into this because I actually probably want to do a deep dive into it someday. I'd never heard about it until digging into Satellaview, so I'm really excited for that. While I'm thinking about it, I wanted to add like one note too. When you think about this service living on past Nintendo's involvement, you might wonder like, what games? How would they even send games without SoundLink? It's important to note that the SoundLink games only occurred during these very specific windows of time that were predetermined, and they were kind of episodic in that way. So you'd have 4 parts of Harvest Moon, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks during this 1 hour chunk of time. The rest of the time, they were broadcasting constant available downloads for games that didn't require SoundLink, and also things like the magazines, news, things like that. So SoundLink really was cool, and I believe after looking at a chart, you know, they didn't have the support of Nintendo at that point, so how were they going to provide these really, really rich, immersive experiences via SoundLink? It's kind of only a matter of time if you think about it. The most fun little piece of trivia that is most relevant to today in gaming, as I think about it, is that the legend and the impact of Satellaview actually lives on, and that is through Super Mario Odyssey. There is a Satellaview suit that was announced and introduced in 2018 for Super Mario Odyssey, which is a callback directly to the Satellaview. So if you look up this outfit, Mario is wearing kind of an astronaut-y moment. He's got a little helmet. He's got like a red pack looking thing on the front of him, and this outfit is the exact same outfit that Mario wears in a Japanese commercial for the Satellaview. So they remember this huge part of history even today in 2018, which I think is really, really sick and really cool of Nintendo to do, because obviously, as we've learned here today, and I invite you to do your own research if this interests you, Satellaview really was ahead of its time, and something so wild to even imagine during this time period, and something that I think should be studied and treasured and valued for what it is, which is kind of a lot of the reason I dig all of this podcast content, is because we don't realize how good we have it until we look back and think, wow, like we've come so far, but some moments and some games and some experiences were just such gems in the moment, and you may have never even heard about it until today. So I'm excited to share that story with you, and I hope that you enjoyed. Again, I want to give huge shout outs for lots of great content that I found online for this episode via SegaRetro.org, RetroCDN.net, RetroMags.com, Bulbapedia, SuperFamicom.org, the Nintendo Fandom Wiki, good old reliable Wikipedia, and MarioWiki.com. I'll ask again so kindly, please rate, review, tell your friends, tell your dentist, tell the person that works at the car wash, tell your crush, tell them about this podcast if you like it. Spread the word, let folks know what you love about it, and tell them to check it out if you like it. Also, please check out the YouTube channel associated with this. Please do subscribe if you are able to. It really helps out the channel, as well as the ratings and reviews. And also, I would be silly not to tell you and remind you about Classic Game Fest in Austin, Texas. As of this recording, next weekend, next Saturday and Sunday in Austin, Texas, July 23rd, 24th. I will be there with my booth. I'm really, really excited to participate in the content creator panel on Sunday. It's going to be a really incredible weekend. So much good stuff to check out. So many incredible vendors, really cool gaming celebrities that will be there, like the inventor of Qbert, which I think is so sick. The original voice of NBA Jam will be there. I'm so stoked on that. I just played that game on stream not too long ago. But thank you so much for listening. I really, really appreciate it. I hope you learned something, and I'm so excited to dig into March 2000 with you next week. Take care of yourselves, and remember to work hard, be nice, and have fun. This is Emma Pearl here with Today in Gaming Yesterday, and I will see you next time.